Today on the Sandro Forte Success Stream, I am joined, I'm very, very honoured to say, by the businessman and entertainment impresario who built the Apollo Leisure Group and turned it into the UK's biggest theatre owner and the largest independent family-run cinema chain. Today we're going to talk Scarborough, the Sex Pistols, Sesame Street and Scrooge, and probably Everton Football Club as well, but Everton doesn't begin with S. So, but we're definitely going to talk about that because it's a very, very big part of his life. So the one and the only, and if you've been living under a stone, you may not know the name, but if you haven't, you definitely will. Paul Gregg, welcome to the Sandro Forte Success Stream. Great, and a great honour for me personally, because we have got a lot in common. Perhaps not the vast amounts of wealth that you now enjoy, but everything else. So welcome. Really good to have you on the programme.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Really interesting.
Let's go back then, Paul, to where it. We're never going to unpick all this in half an hour. There's no way, because your career spans many decades. And if you don't mind me saying, you look incredible for your age. I'm not going to embarrass you by mentioning, but you're in your 9th decade, and you look incredible for it. So you're going to have to let us into the secrets of that one in due course. But one of the things that I'm really interested in, which I'd like to unpack, is how you kind of have this incredible talent for spotting an opportunity. But we'll come back to that in a second, because we'll talk Lyceum and some of the other acquisitions you made along the way. But let's just, for those few people that don't know you, Paul, maybe we can go back to kind of where it all began, because not a lot of us know about the young Paul Gregg. So take us from the beginning to the present day in a kind of an overview.
Well, from a business point of view, I went to Hull Nautical College, and I suppose I had the ambition then to sail QE2, but never did, because my mother was incredibly ill at the time, and we had a great relationship, and I just felt I couldn't go to the other side of the world while she was so ill. So I stayed at home, went and worked in my father's business with Preston Fisher for a few years, until I saw an opportunity to be an assistant manager or training manager with Odeon Cinemas. So I toddled off for the interview, and the question was, what is 5% of £100? And I could not answer it. I failed miserably in that. So fortunately, a few months later, ABC advertised for training managers, and I was able to join them at the ABC Sheffield, which was their flagship cinema in that day. And that's how we got into there. And then we went into theatre marketing, and with a group called Star Cinemas, which was interesting. Then down to Oxford to Preston Fisher to be an entertainment and social manager there, and then ended up in Southport with the council, becoming director of publicity and attractions, which I sort of enjoyed. You know, it was a really good time.
One of the things that, I mean, I've read your book, we'll talk about that in a moment, Backstage Without a Past, which I have to say is one of the most brilliantly written books. And I genuinely mean that, because I've had the pleasure of reading it. Really well put together, tells an amazing story of your life and the successes and some of the failures along the way, right? Because, you know, there's no successes without a few failures. But, you know, if I can just take you, let's just talk about the Lyceum for a minute, because you don't really have to be a theatre lover to know the Lyceum. It's pretty iconic. But there's this story that you tell in the book, Paul, where you're kind of walking along the street in London one day and you see a for sale sign. And really where I'm going with this is not the necessarily the acquisition of that asset, but the fact that you did something that really no one else really had the courage to do. You saw something, it was dilapidated, but you put a lot of money into it. You took a big chance. You did that with other assets as well later on. What is it about Paul Gregg and all of your experiences that led you into a career that really, you know, I know from my own experiences, having been to drama school, it's the kind of the career that everyone says, don't touch the theatre, you're never going to make money from it. So what compelled you to sniff out the opportunity and do something so amazing? Because everything that followed was astonishing.
I think the first thing is that we had a great team. We had David Rogers, who was our chief executive finance director, Sam Schroeder, operation director, who's sadly dead now, and Steve Lavelle, our property director. And we effectively worked as a team, and we had a chap who's now doing a fantastic job in the 3 Arena in Dublin, Mike Adamson. And really that 5 people brought the company together, and we grew with opportunity rather than a great plan. Although David Rogers had his 5-year business plan, this is where we're going to be. Sam and I would tell him on many occasions, we don't even know what's going to work on those days to make that be delivered. But usually we ended up somewhere close to it. But I think, look, we had a great opportunity with the Apollo Manchester when we started. You know, John Denver went there, couldn't see the audience, went berserk with the producer, went berserk with the Barry Clayman, who was promoting the concert, who went berserk with Lord Delpont to own it when he was the chairman of EMI. And Delpont said, take it off me, I don't want it anymore. We're not into live shows. You guys get on with it. And we did a deal with him. And really, we then grew by opportunity, not by plan.
Wow. And you know, you've mentioned in Manchester, but you also bought the Liverpool Empire, which at the time was losing, if I'm not wrong here, Paul, correct me if I am, £750,000 a year, something like that?
It was. And if you remember, it was the time when there was a county council in Liverpool. Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister. And I'm trying to think of the guy in Liverpool who was the chairman of the county council.
Was it Derek Hatton?
Derek Hatton. And he said, I'm going to close the theatre if the government do this, that. Yeah. So it became a flagship argument between the government and Liverpool County Council. Anyhow, in the end, the Arts Council rang us and said, look, will you guys take over the Empire Liverpool? So we said, well, it's just losing. As you just said, 750 grand a year. So I said, well, we wanted to stay because we've got commitments with Welsh National Opera and the ballet and all the other things. So we'll help you. So what they effectively did was reduce the terms on those visiting companies, which effectively eliminated some of the losses. But we had a great time. I mean, Liverpool Empire is a great theatre. It
is, yeah. So when you came to eventually sell Apollo to SFX in 1999, one of the things I come across a lot, Paul, when I'm talking to entrepreneurs who've built incredible businesses, it becomes very hard to let go, you know, because you built not just an incredible business, but you, in your own words, you built a family, and the family at the time was, you know, 5,000 people. So how easy or difficult was it to let go? Because I'm really intrigued to know, more than anything else, how somebody in their 80s, even though you look as good as you do, where does the motivation come from? Because you've done talk sport, you've done TV, you're being interviewed countless times a week at the moment. The book has just come out. Where do you get your energy, your enthusiasm, your drive, and your motivation from?
I don't know. I love the business. And to be honest, I went to New York before we completed the deal to sell the company. And I saw Jimmy Niederlander, who was our partner in the Dominion. And he said to me, he said, you're crazy. He said, you shouldn't be doing this. He said, you never own the Lyceum again or anything like it. He said, you've got a fantastic company. And he said, I shouldn't do it. And on the day we signed the contract, I said to David Rogers, I don't really want to do this. What's it going to cost from a legal point of view? And he said, probably about £500,000. But I still didn't want to do the deal, but I was under huge pressure from my son, who was there, and the person who represented my wife. And they sort of insisted that we should get on with it. But it was my biggest, for me, it was my biggest single mistake, because it wasn't about the money. The money was great money, but it wasn't about the money. It was about my lifestyle and what I enjoyed doing. And I think that for me was the biggest blow. And also, you know, like David Rogers might have been our chief executive, but he also managed the assets. So he was almost indirectly my wealth manager in his own way, you know, in running the company and looking after the asset. And I think, you know, when we sold it, it's interesting that all four of us have done other things, but not with the same success that we enjoyed with Apollo.
You mentioned earlier, Paul, the word crazy, and there was another moment in your career, however successful it's been, where you were described, I think, as crazy when you decided to pay Richard Burton £40,000 a week. Again, if I'm not mistaken.
Richard Harris, actually.
Oh, Richard, that's right. I beg your pardon. Richard Harris. Yeah.
Same quality stars.
Yeah. Was that your ethos, though? You know, about, you know, how. What were the pillars upon which you built such a successful business? That there must have been a mantra, there must have been a particular modus operandi, for example. What was it about Apollo that made it so successful, or your approach to business, for example?
I think it was the support and the relationship we enjoyed with producers and promoters. We had a great time when we opened the Apollo Victoria in Hammersmith. Victoria. The place had been dark and empty and that, and we persuaded Odeon to let us have a lease for it, and we got on with it. And we decided it would be the in-town concert venue because there was nothing in the city that was really concert. So we opened it with Cliff Richard and Shirley Bassey, and then we had John Denver and, a whole host, Liza Minnelli, Dean Martin. Dean Martin was great. He was fantastic. So and then Ross Taylor came to me and said, I want to put the Sound of Music on. Well, he didn't tell me first. He kept it as a secret. That was his style. But he sort of said, look, I've got a big show. We've just finished Key and I at the Palladium. I don't want to work with Storm Moss anymore. So he said, I'd like to come to the Apollo Victoria. And I thought, well, not a bad idea. It takes it away from being a concert venue. And we worked with him, and we got Petula Clark to star in the role of it. And incidentally, we're talking to her about doing a concert at the Palladium this autumn. She's 90 years old, sold more albums than the Beatles, and she's just had an amazing career.
Wow. As I mentioned earlier on, we have a bit in common. There's a connection with Hull, and we live in a very similar part of the world. And the theatre, of course, as I've already mentioned, and the fact that I have very close connections with football. And one of the clubs that I have a close connection with is Everton Football Club. Now, not everyone will necessarily know that you were part of the Everton journey, because everyone, of course, will remember Bill Kenwright as the figurehead, the person who acquired Everton. But just tell us about what happened there. The kind of the start and the finish, because of course it was a fairly famous falling out in 2004. But how did you get involved in Everton? What was the thinking there? Was it a particular love of the club or football in general? What started that part of the journey?
It was the relationship with Bill Kenwright, because we'd enjoyed a relationship with him in the theatre, taking his shows into our theatres, because he was a great, what I would call provincial producer, because he had shows on the road. He had shows on the road, and he used to effectively play our theatres. So we'd sold the company, and I rang him to say congratulations on buying Everton Football Club. And we had a chat about it and, what we wanted to do and that. And then 3 weeks later, he said, listen, do you want a piece of it? And when he'd done the shows, he'd ring me up and say, oh, I'm going to do the Mikado tour. Do you want to come in with me? And he'd play our venues, and I'd say yes. So I just simply said, yeah, I think we would do. Whatever you've got in it, we'll put in it. And we got on with it. But it was a totally different experience, and a totally different Bill Kenwright in the role of chairman of Everton Football Club.
Have you reconciled your differences?
Well, he passed away last year, didn't he?
But prior to passing.
But we didn't really reconcile our differences on Everton, because, when we got there, we sort of said, he said he'd look after the football side, which I had no knowledge about at all. And I said, okay. And then I looked in the club and where we were. Goodison Park is a great stadium in its own way, but it's old and it's great, but it's just doesn't meet today's standards. Yeah. And so we designed the King's Dock, and we spent with Steve Lavelle, ex-property director from Apollo, on designing a fantastic stadium, King's Dock. And the stadium was designed so the roof came in and out, the pitch came in and out, and it meant that we could put Madonna in concert tonight and we could play Arsenal tomorrow afternoon. It was a fantastic concept. And also, the City Council were anxious to have it as a facility for the Year of the City of Culture. So we went on, and they asked Everton to provide 30 million quid. So I arranged a second mortgage, and Bill asked me to go and see his financial advisor, who is well known anyhow, and he said to Bill, I think this is okay, you should do this. And then 2 days later, the AGM, he announced he wasn't going to take any second mortgage on the stadium and do the deal at all. I rang David Harrison, the chief executive of the city, and said, David, he doesn't want to do it. He's turned around, he doesn't want to do it. He said he didn't want to raise the 30 million quid. So David Harrison, chief executive, said, look, I can't wait any longer. Will you just get on with it, and we'll find the money, and you just lease the stadium. So I went back to Bill and said, we can lease a stadium. We don't need any money. Go and spend it on the playing field if you want, but this is, as far as I'm concerned, a go. Let's get on with it. He said, no, I've got to own the stadium, and he wouldn't do it. And we had a stadium designed by the same architects as the Spurs stadium. So we'd been state of the art 20 years ago. So that was like losing, no Evertonian likes to lose,
No. And do you privately, do you follow Everton, or are you a sporting fan?
I follow the football, the Premiership League, and after I'd left Everton, we had a year with the Premier League planning a Premier League World Tour, where we're going to effectively tour all the brands. But I think I watched it. I mean, last year was a very tough time when they nearly went down.
Yeah.
And part of me felt if they go down, then maybe Bill might have to resign. And then a new broom can come into the club and make it better. And I think, look, sadly he passed away last year, but I think for Everton, he may have been the greatest Evertonian fan, but he wasn't the best person to be the chairman. And I think that now they have a real chance of moving forward in a different way.
Yeah. And how often do you see that actually? Like you say, all the right attributes, but probably just the wrong position or wrong time. You're well known, Paul, for bringing the Lion King to the UK. So many things. I mean, the CV is as long as my arm, so we can't unpack everything in the short time together. But successes and failures, we mentioned it earlier. One of the things, if you don't mind me saying, that I love in your book is right at the end. You mentioned both your ex-wives in your dedications, which in and of itself is quite unusual. But presumably, you have a good relationship with them. I'm not going to pry into your private life; that would be inappropriate. But tell us a little bit about you've talked about one or two mistakes you made along the way. There's a lot of people that listen to this program, Paul, that will email in. We get thousands of emails where people say, I've got a great idea, I just don't know how to get started, or I've come up against a problem or a challenge or an obstacle and I don't know how to deal with it. From a man who's achieved pretty much everything that he set out to achieve, what reassuring words would you have for anyone thinking, well, Paul, he just landed on his feet, right place, right time. Success is linear. People never make mistakes if they're successful. What do you say to people who doubt themselves when it comes to building a business?
I think sadly you always need a good mistake to learn from. So I think there's that element of it. But at the same time, I think it's having people around you. I mean, when I did the deal for the Lyceum, I went home and I was sat quietly having dinner, and I'm debating how I'm going to tell my wife. They said we were married for 40 years, and she said, what the hell do you need another theatre for? How many more do you need, kind of thing? And I said, it's not that. I said, it's the Lyceum. I said, it's an amazing building set in the heart of London. I said, flagship, all bloody mental. So she went berserk with me. And then I rang David Rogers 2 hours later, the chief exec. I said, David, I want you to come to London with me on Monday. Oh, yeah. I said, what? I said, I bought the Lyceum. Are you mental? He said, how much is that going to cost? Which is his first concern. I said, I don't know. I said, I reckon about 9 million quid, maybe 10, I don't know. But I said, look, it would be great for the Lion King. And I'd seen the Lion King's first preview in Minneapolis. And Peter Schneider, who was producing for Disney, had worked for me when we did Camelot. So we had some kind of relationship. Not that it was easy to deal with as the head of Disney, but it was certainly, fine. So eventually, 2 years later, we delivered it into the Lyceum. 25 years this year ago.
Wow. And the Camelot's the Richard Harris connection, presumably, where you chucked £40,000 a week and got into a bit of trouble for that as well, right?
Yeah, we dropped 750 grand, which was a long time ago, so it was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And one of our lucky situations was we built the company on cash flow. So we're getting shows on sale, carrying advance bookings, helped us with our cash flow. And so the next challenge with Camelot is going, because in those days you were dead, with bad reviews. So I think we played about another 4 or 5 weeks while we got everybody out of it. And then we managed to persuade Topol to come in with Fiddler on the Roof, which helped. And Wayne Sleep had a fantastic show at that time on the road, selling out everywhere. And we were able to persuade Wayne to come in for 7 weeks, which was so it eased our cash flow.
Yeah. Also, in your book, you dedicate and say some very lovely things about the person who you say keeps you well fed and looking young, Yoshiko.
Yeah.
So how did you meet?
We met. I was getting some treatment, and she was telling me that she had some friends who just won an award in a movie festival in Monaco, and they wanted to show the film in London. And she said, "Where can we get a venue for it?" So I said, "Look, if it's available, the ideal place would be the BAFTA screening rooms in Piccadilly." Yeah. So we did a deal, and I've been a member of BAFTA for 30 odd years. So we did a deal, and we effectively showed this film, June Eye, and it got great audience reaction, great reviews. And then we started going out after that.
It's a lovely story. You sounds like you've got a great family, and that's clearly a very important part of your life. Earlier on in the introduction, I mentioned, and we can't let you go. We'll talk about the book in a second. Before we do, I mentioned Sesame Street, the Sex Pistols, Scarborough. We've talked about very briefly. How on earth there'll be people watching this today thinking Sex Pistols, Sesame Street? How does all that fit into Paul Gregg's life?
Well, Sesame Street was linked by an American producer we had a good relationship with, but we didn't make any money with it for some unknown reason. It just didn't seem to work in the UK. Sex Pistols were a big attraction. Manchester, everywhere, they played everywhere. And that, so, and like everybody, I mean, we were looking up on the first Queen tour for them to play Apollo Manchester, which was a fantastic event. ABBA played there, Carpenters played there. We had all those bands that were rising before anybody had thought about putting them on in arenas, so it was a fantastic time in those early days,
Paul, I mean, you're a very modest man. You've achieved some extraordinary things, and you have every right to be immodest, but you've always been very modest from everything I know of you and what I've read. The book is extraordinary. I would actively encourage anyone watching today, listening to Paul, if you want his life to come alive in a book, it's a book well worth buying. Backstage Without a Pass. I have to ask you, I mean, with that title clearly wasn't thrown together. Backstage, for obvious reasons, the theatre connection. Pass, anything to do with football? Or is it just that common expression? Because if it is, that's very clever.
No, I think it stemmed really from our relationship with Barry Clayman, who we were in partnership for many years, growing the concert division where we did, Michael Jackson's show, everybody of any name and that. And I used to go in the office and say, "Can I have a couple of tickets for so-and-so?" And he'd, "Oh, well, we sold out. What do you mean, a couple of tickets?" Kind of thing. Yeah. And eventually I'd end up backstage. So I took a view, when I started on this maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that Backstage Without a Pass wasn't a bad title. Yoshiko said she didn't like it, think of something else, but we've stuck with it, and it seems to work now today, so I'm quite pleased with it.
It does. Well, the football connection, I just picked up on the football connection. Yeah. Whether deliberate or not, it works on 2 levels for me. It's really, really well written, I have to say, and because I've known you or known of you for a very long time, it was lovely to really kind of lift the lid on that journey. I suppose my final question, because it will be the one on everybody's lips, and if we don't deal with this, they will send bucket loads of emails, which I will have to reply to. What would you very kindly and graciously said, Paul, you've been surrounded by a good team, and I think anybody that's ever done anything in business would recognize that they are only as good as the team around them. But the bottom line is the success of the Apollo was down to you. What methodologies or mantras do you have as an individual? What were the 1 or 2 things that you would say were probably the most important parts of your success? Do you have a particular, is it just hard work? Is it, a bit of courage? Because clearly you did some deals that no one else would have touched with a barge pole at the time, but you had the courage and the courage of your convictions. What is it about Paul Gregg that has made you so successful?
I think I would say to you, the team was really important. And I think that since we sold the company, I've missed the team anyhow, and the people. And we had a great relationship with us. But I think, they would say, well, listen to him, he's got 20 ideas, of which only one's any good, and don't dump the other 19. And I think that in a way, we've had ups and downs, but I think that on the theatre side, we were great in what we saw. And I think, buying the ICM was, you're right. I was walking down the street, and it was Team We Reign, and I looked there and I saw this sign for sale. I thought, this can't be for sale. Why is it not for sale? Why has it been empty for so long? And I dialed the number and I said to the guy, I said, listen, I think I'd like to buy this. And he asked me what we did, and I explained to him and he said to me, well, what do you think, how much you want to buy it? I said, well, it seemed like £1 million. He said, it seems like enough, come and see me on Monday. And on Monday I went to see him with David Rogers, and I had Steve Lavelle crawling all over the building. And I said, I think we only want to pay $750 for it. He said, no, you don't. He said, you want it, so you're going to pay £1 million, or you're not going to get it. So what are you going to do? I said, we pay the £1 million. And then, but that, like the Point in Dublin, I went to see the Point in Dublin when I first did it, and Harry Crosby, who was a great local Dublin businessman, in a sense, he saw what the future was for Dublin in many ways, and you can see it today when you go there. And we looked around, and we were looking for a second home in Ireland for cats. And we looked at the Point, and I said to him, well, we could do this, and this maybe with it. And then I left him and had to think about it. And 2 hours later, he rings me back and he says, can we have a drink before you go for your dinner tonight in Ireland? It was a cinema ball. I said, yeah, come down. He said, look, we're on. You can have half the business. We put £2.5 million and we get on with it. The Point has been transformed by its current MD, Mike Adamson. It's now the 5th most successful arena in the world. Mm. And it's amazing. And it's fantastic atmosphere. And so we have a bit of a legacy of things around the place at the moment.
Yeah, on the subject of legacy, I mean, clearly you've already left yours, but and I would always hesitate to ask somebody of more mature years, what's next, because most people are either gardening or golfing. But everything I know about you, Paul, there is a what's next. So what are you thinking? What's the next deal? What's the next chapter in your unwritten book?
Well, a few years ago, we took some tented theatres to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And one particular design was really good. And we decided to extend it so that it could be stage West End shows as well as concerts and other events. And on the day of the pandemic, when Saudi closed the airport down, we had a contract on their desk for £3 million to rebuild it. And it all fell away. So we've redesigned it, and we're in 2 serious conversations, one in Ireland and one in England, about building what we call a Colosseum Theatre, which is seats 2,000 for major musicals and concerts, and can go standing to 6,000, 7,000. So we're hoping that we get those confirmed in the next couple of months. So we're having a bit of a plot.
It's a beautiful, brilliant story, and I don't think we're, by the sounds of it, I don't think we're halfway through, given your entrepreneurial spirit and skill. Paul, it's been such a pleasure talking to you today. I could go on chatting to you all day, and maybe through our dear friend Keith, we can maybe continue this over a beer or a glass of wine some other time, or maybe we can get you back, because I'm sure there will be calls for a part 2.
Yeah.
But it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey and all the successes and some of the failures along the way. It really has been very inspiring. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your time, and thank you for reading the book as well.
It's an easy read because it was so terrific. So Backstage Without Pass, go get yourself a copy.
Thank you very much.
So see you all next time for another Sandro Forte success stream. But for today, I'm sure you'll agree, Paul Gregg, what an inspiration. Absolutely terrific individual, very modest, very successful, but a few life lessons to take along with us on our own journey. So until this time, next time, goodbye for now.